thank you all for joining and choosing to spend part of your Monday evening with us. My name's Katie. I head up the marketing team here at SEIB Insurance Brokers. If you don't know anything about SEIB, we are an equestrian insurance broker specialising in everything to do with equestrian insurance. So we're talking everything from horse insurance through to horse boxes and trailers, delivery yards and riding schools. Tonight, we're thrilled to be hosting our second webinar with Cheryl Johns, founder of LiveryList and the Yard Owner Hub, which I'm sure a large number of you are aware of. But if you're not, please do go on and have a look at her website. Cheryl is a qualified and experienced yard manager, marketing advisor, and business consultant with experience across a range of different industries. Tonight, she'll be tackling the topic of understanding the cost of running a livery yard, something that I'm sure is highly relevant to all of you on the webinar this evening. So without further ado, I will pass over to Cheryl to start the webinar. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks, Katie. Katie, just give me a thumbs up. Oh, you've gone. It's okay. I'm sure everyone can hear me.
I'm back. I can hear you.
I was just checking that you could hear me. It's fine. It's all good. So like Katie said, thank you everybody for coming and spending some Monday evening with me so I can talk to you about sustainable yard management. I will just very briefly tell you a bit about myself. Quite a few of you will know who I am already, and some of you may have never heard of me. So I'm Cheryl Johns. I run a website called LiveryList, and I also run the Yard Owner Hub. I set LiveryList up in 2011, and it's evolved over the years to become the largest resource for yard owners. The hub's been put on its own website this year, and it offers a huge array of resources and templates and guidance on all aspects of yard management, not just for livery yards, but it's applicable to all sorts of equestrian establishment, riding schools, equestrian centres as well. It's all completely free to access, and my main goal is really to try to help add value and better understanding to the industry, because obviously at the moment there are zero regulations or obligations by yard managers or in the running of a yard. So hopefully if we can try and get everybody on the same page of understanding best practice and good yard management, then it's advantageous for all. So as well as the websites, I also work as a consultant for some of the well-known equestrian businesses and organisations, helping them better understand the livery industry. So some of you may have attended a similar webinar to this before. I've run it a couple of times, but each time it's been updated. So I tend to go through this fairly quickly. It would be helpful if you had a pen and paper if there was anything that you wanted to note down. But as you might know, this is being recorded. So afterwards, Katie is going to send out a link to various resources, follow-up information, and also the recording. So if there's anything that you don't catch, obviously you can watch the playback of it, or you're quite welcome to send any questions directly to myself or Katie. There will be a brief opportunity for question and answer session, because there's quite a lot of people on the call. What we're going to do is ask people to put any questions in the chat function, and then when I finish the presentation, I will stop sharing my screen and I'll just have a look through the chat, and we'll pick out a couple of more generic questions that hopefully I can get answered and will be applicable to many of you. So I'll just check that I've said everything, which I have. So right, we'll get on. So this is sustainable yard management, understanding the costs of running your yard. So the benefits of understanding your costs, and again, this whole webinar is not just applicable to livery yards or even equestrian establishments. It is mainly just good business sense. So the benefits of understanding your costs is to know you're covering your outgoings with what you're charging for your livery, to understand your level of financial stability, to ensure the long-term viability of your business, to maintain the standards, provisions, that is to say the services and consumables, for example, that you offer within your packages, and your staffing, to provide financial security for the business, to invest in improvements, and ultimately the goal of a business is to earn an income, which is a very foreign word, I expect, to many of you. So common mistakes made by yard owners regarding their costs is a lot of yard owners don't actually calculate their costs before they decide what they're charging. They unfortunately, many yard owners tend to pluck amounts from thin air that they feel right or compared to other yards locally, when really it is definitely a must do that you need to know your costs before you know what you want to charge. Omitting running costs from calculations, so that's costs that might be overlooked from the things that you think of off the top of your head that go into running the yard. Forgetting to include their own labour, not implementing regular price increases, or for some any price increases at all, keeping livery charges low to keep their stables full and avoid an exodus of liveries if you put your prices up, and a guilt culture overriding charging people the right prices. So we'll cover all of these in a bit more detail shortly. Problems caused by not charging enough. Not covering your costs is the obvious one. Subsequently, this will lead to difficulty in paying your bills and accruing debt. You may find that you end up paying out of your own pocket the bills that are related to paying the yard. Subsidising your liveries and their horses. False impression of the cost of horse ownership. Makes it difficult for other yards to compete or compare, because nobody really knows what a true charge should be for a particular package if people haven't worked out their costs. And a difficulty to maintain the yard or your standards. So I, as well as LiveryList and the Yard Owner Hub, I also run quite a large Facebook group for livery yard owners, and there's riding school and other equestrian establishment owners on there as well. And we quite often see a lot of these problems cropping up. So I've really been pushing the costing your livery business for some years now. And I think a lot of yard owners, when they actually get down to sitting and working out their prices, are quite alarmed when they realise that they are actually subsidising their liveries horses. So basically, at the end of the month, they are paying out their own pockets to cover the bills that are related to running their yard, which is obviously not how it should be. You should be, at the very worst, covering your costs. You know, you should never be having to reach into your pocket or go into debt to be paying for somebody else's hobby, you know, and basically paying them to keep their horse at your yard. So these what I've tried to address in this webinar is a lot of these problems that crop up, that some of it I might be teaching some of you to suck eggs, but some of it might be revelations, and it's all put together in a combination that will help yard owners hopefully improve one way or another to make their business a bit more viable and enjoyable for them. So this, if it doesn't give you a headache, you can have a brief look through this flowchart, which basically just it explains in fairly simple terms the fact that if one yard increases their prices, it can ultimately help raise the value of livery overall, because a lot of yard owners will look on other websites to see what other yards are charging, and then might base their prices off of that. And obviously horse owners, when they're picking a yard, will be looking at various prices and thinking, oh, that yard's expensive, that yard's quite cheap. So basically, if one yard puts their prices up, this increases the expectation of livery costs for horse owners. Other yards will be aware of your price increase, and it will then hopefully make other yards consider their pricing, especially if they see that you're considerably more expensive than they are. And then if that encourages them to put their prices up, it goes back to the beginning, and it starts what should be a non-vicious circle of gradually increasing the prices. I have definitely seen a noticeable turn in perhaps the last 12 months of yard owners being a lot more confident and willing to review their prices and to put them up to the right prices. So common causes of ineffective livery pricing: guessing or assuming your costs, charging an amount that feels right, being governed by what your liveries can afford, basing prices to be competitive with other local yards, using out-of-date costs. So you might be thinking, it might be that you worked your costs out 2 years ago, so you have a vague idea of what your costs could be. Obviously, at the minute, costs have gone up hugely over the last 12 to 18 months. So even 6 months ago, your costs may have been considerably cheaper than they are now. Not valuing what you offer is another problem for yard owners. And mainly, and the most important, many yard owners forget that it is a business. So how to effectively work out your costs: you need to calculate your costs, and then only after that point decide your livery charges. You need to make sure you include each and every outgoing for running the yard, and we'll cover this in the next couple of slides. Calculate your working hours and include within your costs. Maintain records to keep up to date on your costs. Regularly check and review outgoings. So, for example, what I was just saying about there could be month to month a sudden increase in, for example, your hay or your bedding bills. And to make sure that you implement regular price increases, which is again something else that I will cover a bit later. So what do you include in your costings? Commonly considered costs. So this will be costs that you, or perhaps more commonly your liveries, will think off the top of their head when they think of the costs that go into running a yard. Rent or mortgage. So that could also include business rates and council tax, for example, under that bracket. Utilities, staffing and all the costs that go with staffing. Maintenance of paddocks, fencing, stables, arenas, muck removal, general DIY to keep the yard up together. Package inclusions, so consumables, that would be to say, for example, hay, bedding, feed, anything that's consumed, basically. Labour, if you're offering service livery packages. Insurances, so you could have a range of insurances. You could have insurance for the property, liability for the business, care, custody and control. You could have personal accident, business interruption, and professional fees. So memberships, for example, if you're a BHS approved yard, bank interest and bank fees. I put this under commonly considered, but actually these tend to be the small numbers that tend to get forgotten. Rates, accountancy, VAT, all sorts of administration costs. But then aside from that, there's a lot of commonly overlooked costs. So this is more likely to be things that you might just pick up when you're in the shop or just stick on an order, and you don't really at the time perhaps register that it is that it's a cost for the business. And these tend to be the sort of receipts that end up under your seat in the car or in your pocket in the washing machine. So it's basically running, repairs and replacements. And most of these I would say are probably things that are sort of £50 or under, which at the time it perhaps isn't a great deal, but it would all add up, I'm sure, if you sat down and worked out over the year. So yes, running repairs and replacements, so that could just be bits for the yard, even things like hay nets, buckets, if you need to replace damage to fencing or electric fencing, even if it's just the screw and insulators, a box of those, all of these costs should be included. Vehicles and machinery, so this could be if you've got machinery on the yard, if you've got a quad or a gator or something like that you use around the yard, any costs that go into the running of that and the maintenance of that. But also within reason, you can include costs for your own vehicle. So it could be that you use the HMRC allowance for commuting, if you've got a horse box that you use, if you, again, within reason, are transporting horses, perhaps you do competition livery, then that would be a reasonable cost to include. Health and safety, so that would be first aid kits, horse and human, work clothing, staff training, fire extinguishers, work clothing. There's always questions on the yard owner group about what are the best waterproof boots, what are the best gloves, what is the best wet weather gear. And I always at the back of my mind think, I wonder if they're including that and putting that receipt through the business. So anything like that for work clothing, marketing, any sort of advertising, leaflet sponsorship. Administration, I think, must get very overlooked. You know, if you I know that I have an annual subscription to Microsoft Office, for example, which is £99 a year. So that to me is a business cost because I do things like this for business. Printing, ink, paper, pens, your phone bill, anything like that that goes into the administrative side of running your business. And then consumables, silly little things, toilet rolls, tea bags, light bulbs, bin bags, things that probably get put in with your own weekly shop that end up on the yard for use by yourself or your staff or your liveries. Basically, the costs that you can put through your business is anything that is within reason that is used within the course of business. So if it's something that you're buying to put on the yard that is facilitating the services that you offer, helping looking after the horse, your staff, anything like that, is obviously a cost that should be put aside as a running cost of your business. So one thing that's massively overlooked by livery yard owners is the actual labour. So many yard owners know what the costs are, you know, their rent, their hay, everything else, but so many either forget to include labour or they don't, because if they include labour, that would make their livery far too expensive. And I'm sure this is probably resonating with many of you, but obviously there is a value to your labour on the yard. If you're working 5 days a week on the yard and then at the end of the year find out that you've subsidised the horses on your yard, you know, you're subsidising your livery's horses, then basically you're volunteering on your own yard full time. So it really is so important that you need to work out and attribute a cost for your labour into your livery costings. So there's just some guidance here. So the national minimum wage obviously went up in April. This is if you're over 23, which I strongly suspect a vast majority of us this evening are. So that's £10.42 an hour. So don't forget that that's the national minimum wage. So that is someone in fairly basic employment. Indeed, the recruitment company, their average horse groom salary, this is from last month, is £10.29 an hour. Obviously that's below minimum wage, but don't forget that this could be including those that are under 23. And British Grooms Association survey, their most recent survey in 2019 placed grooms at between £9 and £13 an hour. So kind of you're looking at roughly minimum wage as an average. But what you need to remember is that these figures here is a basic cost. So these are groom salaries. There's no such research for yard managers. It is too specific. So this is just lumped in as a horse groom. But if you remember, as the owner of your business, you're so much more than a horse groom, because you're not just looking after the horses, you're actually physically managing the yard, managing the property, managing the clients. Personally, I always recommend circa £20 an hour, because I think that that's not an unreasonable sum of money to expect in a managerial role, especially when it's your own business. So if people ever ask me, I always say, I think minimum 15, 18, if you can push it to 20, then that's great. The other thing you need to remember is that it's not just the physical time that you spend working on the yard that you need to include. It's for everything else. So you need to work out the total time that you spend managing the yard and include that within your costs. So that's the physical time spent working on the yard. So whether you're there supervising staff, doing yard work yourself, dealing with clients, it's also administrative jobs for the yard, such as in the office, invoicing, sending emails, showing people around the yard. But also, as well as that, you have to consider if there's anybody else that is unpaid that spends time on the yard. So it could be your partner, perhaps they do maintenance, it could be your children, it could be your parents. So it's not just your costs, it is the costs as a whole that go into the labour that facilitate the running of the yard. And what I always suggest is start on the 1st of the month and keep a record for 1 month of how many hours, roughly, it doesn't need to be specific, but as a guide, you spend doing work for the yard. And I guarantee by the end of that month, you would be very surprised if you then added that up and worked it out, even on what I would suggest minimum of £15 an hour. But it's definitely something, even if you do it over a week, to keep a record, it's definitely something to know at the back of your mind how many hours actually go into running the business. So I'm going to talk a bit about inflation now, and this might get a bit mathsy, but I've tried to keep it really simple. So I expect many of you know what inflation is, but I, in my experience, know that not everybody does. So I'm going a bit back to basics here. So during the cost of living crisis that's been rumbling on for months, there's been a lot of talk about the inflation rate. So basically, the inflation rate is the increase in prices and the fall in the purchasing value of money. So what they class as a normal annual inflation rate is 2 to 3%. Recently, it's reduced to 6.1%, and I think it was sort of April, May, June time, it was at 10%. So at the moment, with the cost of living problems, the Bank of England forecasts that it won't be back to normal until some point next year. So if I explain now what that means in simpler terms, each year the value of £1 increases or decreases, but that doesn't really happen, by the interest rate. So for example, it's normally, let's say, 3%. So if £1 was 100%, 103% would increase the value of that pound to £1.03. So the following year, if it continued and the inflation was another 3%, that £1.03 would need to be multiplied again, which would make it £1.06. So it's a steady increase. And I'll explain a bit shortly about price increases. This is why I think you should always have a price increase that reflects inflation within your livery contracts, but I'll cover that shortly. So basically, to put this in layman's terms, in terms of livery prices, if in 2018 you charged £120 per month for DIY livery, with inflation consideration, so I've based this, I actually did go through and I worked it out 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, and this year with what the average inflation has been according to their government website. And this is purely based on inflation. So this does not include if Farmer Giles has put your hay up by £10 a bale. This is purely based on the government inflation rates. So if you charged £120 per month in 2018, you should now be charging £148 a month, which is obviously quite a leap. So if you're not increasing your prices regularly, say annually, which would be ideal, then you're suddenly going to need to have to do a massive leap. I quite often see on the yard owner group, there's yard owners that haven't put prices up since 2010, or they know that they need a price increase, but they just put it up a little bit. So they're always chasing their tail. So one of the most important things is this, like I said, is obviously just based on inflation. So you should always be doing regular price increases, because at least then you're chipping away a little bit, rather than ending up having to do one huge price increase, which would obviously be far less acceptable by your clients. Right, so we've got the maths bit out of the way now. So how to effectively work out your costs. So as I've mentioned, you need to make sure you record all of your outgoings for your yard. You need to keep all of your receipts and invoices. Try to, for example, if you go and if you have deliveries to the yard, make sure that you have somewhere specific that you put these receipts. Have a folder, have something that you carry around with you. A good suggestion that I always have is to put an app on your phone. So I have a scanner app on my phone, and it means there and then you can take a photo of a receipt or an invoice, and it's there on your phone. So at the end of the month, you can go through, I mean, you could take a photo, anything to make sure that that receipt, even if it's for a £5, doesn't get lost, because you need to have that to make sure that you are properly working out your costs and properly working out what your finances are. So you need to record the hours spent on the yard, as I've mentioned, decide what you're going to charge for that, and then add that on. You need to carry out an end of year review, which is important, because if you try to do a review every 12 months, then you will have a good idea over the 12-month period and the preceding 12-month period where your prices have changed, where your biggest costs are attributed to. Average out over the year is very important. Quite a lot of yards do summer and winter prices, which is great, but then you also find that you get seasonal clients. So you will get people that will come in the summer when the horses are out and it's cheaper, and then they leave before it gets to the winter when there's higher costs because they're in and there's more hay, more bedding, more feed. It's ideal really to work out what your costs are and spread them on to a calendar month basis, because that is overall better for retention of livery clients. And also it's better for the horses on a welfare point of view, because you don't have horses coming in and out all the time disrupting the herd. You're reducing biosecurity risks. You're trying to keep a nice group of liveries without new people coming in and out all of the time. So I think aside from financially, there's quite a few different reasons to spread your costs out over the year when it comes to working your costs out. It's ideal to allow a contingency for price rises. So if you're working out your prices, so for example, if this weekend you sit down and you get your last 12 months worth of receipts and invoices and what have you, and you work out what your costs are, that's for the last 12 months. So you're always working from your previous costs. So I always say, once you've worked out your costs, to put around a 10% contingency, which means that if you suddenly find that your pricing for your feed goes up, or something else that you include goes up, or your rent goes up, your bedding goes up, then you have a small buffer there that you should be able to take that sort of with a bit less of a hit. So that's what it says at the bottom there. You're always working a year behind, which is important to remember when you're working your costs out. So on LiveryList, like I say, we've got there's two separate websites now. So there's LiveryList, which is the original site, which is the directory for equestrian establishments. And then earlier this year, we moved what was the hub on the main site over to its own platform. So it's really simple to find. I think there's about 18 or 20 different categories on there covering all sorts of aspects. It's a bit of a rabbit warren to kind of navigate around because there's so much on there, but it's all from reputable resources, lots of well-known equestrian charities and associations. And within that hub, there is a specific section on livery charges. And when Katie sends out the follow-up email to the webinar, she'll send a link out to that as well. So you'll be able to find everything you could possibly need in helping you manage administratively or practically your yard. But one of the documents on there is the template calculation form. And I've literally updated this in the last week. So the brand new version's on there. And it's basically kind of what I would say a memory jogging list. So a lot of the costs that I've mentioned earlier, it's sort of they're sectioned off here to hopefully help you go through and work out what your costs. So for example, on the left here, business costs, rent. So you would know what that is. So you put in what your annual cost is, and then you work out your monthly cost, and vice versa, depending whether something's annual or monthly. And then I think it's about three or four pages long. And you get to the end and it basically explains to you at the bottom of the right page there how to add a contingency, and then how to work out the cost of your stable per calendar month. So the important thing to remember is that this is just your costs. This is not, you know, if you get that you work out your cost per stable is £110 a month, that does not mean that you charge £110 a month. That means that's what it's costing you to provide that stable per month. So this document is available in PDF if somebody just wants to print it off and fill it in that way. It's also available in Word, so people can go through and make their own adjustments and make it so it's really tailored to your own business. And it's available in Excel now as well. So that's on there. Like I said, it's completely free, along with lots of other bits relating to yard management, calculating your costs and price increases. So the difference between breaking even and earning an income. So as I just mentioned, on the cost calculation sheet, that is only your costs. So if you're covering those costs, you're breaking even. The only difference on this, and again, it's quite tailored to what livery packages you offer. Obviously, if you're DIY, you're going to be very slim on labour costs, but there will still be some, because obviously you will have admin to do still, and I'm sure to an extent you'll still be on the yard keeping an eye on things, carrying out maintenance or what have you. But basically the main difference is the labour charges are your wages. So if you take all of your costs out, as in the things you actually have to pay for, the amount that you've allocated for your labour is your wages. That's what you earn in your pocket after whatever you work, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week on the yard. So to make a profit, you need to charge in excess of your outgoings, because basically if you're only breaking even and there's an unforeseen cost, so prices go up, again, that's going back to paying out of your own pocket and subsidising your liveries. So according to the Office of National Statistics, I'm going very businessy again now. The Office of National Statistics shows that the profitability of UK businesses in March 23, that's when they did their last survey, showed an average profit margin of 16.1% for service firms. So livery would be classed as a service firm because obviously you are providing a service. And I think personally, if you're given the responsibility of looking after somebody's sometimes quite large animal and they're solely trusting you to look after that, then it's a very good service. So a healthy profit margin would be expected as 7 to 10%, but obviously the ONS puts it at much higher than that specifically for service firms. So what that means basically is if you work out that calculation sheet and you get to the end and you work out what your cost per stable are, you then need to add another 16% onto that to actually make it so that you're a business with a decent profit margin. That's how you then become viable, because obviously if you're making profit, you're affording to put away some of that money. So whether that money goes to paying your own household bills, supporting your family, or I know some people have yards are hobbies rather than businesses, or they're just part-time businesses. That extra money that you make that is profit, it's like a foreign concept to yard owners, helps you put away a small amount of money, perhaps for a rainy day if there's a problem on the yard, if you want to invest in something or make improvements. Every extra pound that you make is an extra pound you can put in the bank. So, you know, say you've got 10 boxes and each week you're putting each one up the price a pound, which is a pathetic amount, but as an example, that's an extra £40 a month that could be going in the bank. And a pound to a horse owner over the course of a week is nothing. It's not even a coffee these days. So it's really important to think of the perspective for horse owners as well, and the value of the service that you're offering them at the yard. So some of the biggest issues around raising livery prices, the main one for sure, is that yard owners worry that clients will leave, that they'll send out their price lists, their price increase letters, and that there will be a mass exodus of people, which in my experience doesn't tend to be the case. It tends to be more a worry than reality. Quite often, especially if you've got very loyal clients that perhaps had their horses there a long time, you know, a couple of pounds a week isn't gonna break the bank. Hopefully, I know that affordability is a lot more difficult for people at the moment over the last few months, but what you do need to remember is for horse owners to have a horse is a choice. I know it's always cliche, or it's a luxury, but really it is. People don't have to have a horse. It's that hobby that they choose to do. It's obviously a large responsibility, and they need to pay what it costs to provide a satisfactory service where they know that their horse will be kept, where everything's considered. So yes, so worrying about becoming expensive compared to other local yards, if you have horse owners that shop around when they're looking for livery and yours is more expensive, that can be a worry. Not raising prices across the board, gilt culture, this would be known as. So, you know, if you've got Sue, and Sue's had her horse with you for 20 years and she still pays the same rate that she did in 2006, and you don't want to put her price up because she's great and she's really good at making cups of tea, so you're going to put everyone's prices up except Sue's because you don't want to offend her. It can't work like that. The sentiment is great, but as a business, you know, if you're putting prices up, it has to be for one and all. It has to be a business decision and you have to treat it like a business. Another mistake that a lot of yard owners make is only having a small price increase. Again, this is going back to the worrying about putting the prices up too much. But as I've already mentioned, if you only do a small price increase, then you're constantly chasing your tail, because at some point your prices are going to supersede that small increase that you're having each year. Not including or implementing an annual price increase. So this is something, it's really refreshing to see now so many yard owners have contracts, because I know when I first started putting together the documents for the original versions of the Yard Owner Hub about 8 years ago, I did a bit of work with the BHS, and that's originally where the contracts came from. And anybody that's looked on the hub at the contracts will see that there's about 8 different contracts, and all of our contracts are checked by a legal company who go through to make sure all the wording's correct and it has all the right bits on there and the clauses are all worded properly. But one of the things that has to be in a contract is a price increase, and it's so good now to see that so many yard owners have contracts, which they didn't just a few years ago. It's definitely becoming more commonplace for yards to be offering contracts to their clients. But you need to make sure that it works for you as a business. So what's included in your contract is great. But for me, I think all livery contracts should include an annual price increase, or at least the option to review your prices. So you don't have to put your price up, but to have a clause in there that says, and I would always recommend normal inflation levels are around 2 to 3%. So I always say that's a good guide to put into your contracts. You know, that, for example, on the 1st of April every year, livery may be subject to a price increase in line with inflation. And that's all you have to put. And then when you get to April, you know that you have that buffer that you can go in. And if you need to, and I think, frankly, everybody should anyway, is to put those price increases up. So all other businesses do it. I mean, we all know what it's like going to the shop, and the fact that some things seem to have just blown up in price and got much smaller in size. That's because these companies need to cover their costs and to make a profit. And it's regardless of what industry, it's exactly the same applies to livery yards. You know, it is a business, and you need to make sure that you're covering your costs at the very minimum. Another problem is a lot of yard owners don't have a lot of time. They don't have much time to put into the sort of administrative side of things. They don't have time to work it out. Some people don't understand how to work it out. And that's what I said, some of the stuff I'm covering, I apologise if I'm teaching people how to do basic maths, but sometimes it really does help to have somebody, you know, simplify something. And, you know, if one thing clicks that makes everything easier, then that's great. But it really is important to try to find time to set aside to make sure that you're regularly doing your yard admin and working your costs out. Another problem with raising or not raising livery prices is making exceptions. So we're going back to talking about Sue that's been there forever, or too much explanation. So I don't think you need to be sending out a big long letter explaining how all your prices have gone up and how you've come to the decision of the percentage you put your prices up, and, you know, reaffirming what a great yard you are. And it really is as simple as that. You know, if you go to the hairdressers and they put their prices up, they don't need to put on the price list all their reasons why. It's just a given. Everybody knows that prices go up. National minimum wage goes up. The cost of living goes up. Even the little baskets that Tesco put on their advert when they're like, look, we're the cheapest, they will creep up gradually as well. So everybody knows that prices go up. And a lot of horse owners seem to think that yard owners are totally exempt from price increases. So it really is important to be very matter of fact and say, no, this is how the price is going up. This is what it's going up to. This is when it's happening. End of. And I'll cover a bit more about implementing price increases shortly. So how to effectively raise livery prices. Reiterate again, calculate your costs first. You have no idea what you need to charge if you don't know what your costs are. So the way that the calculation sheet that I showed a couple of slides ago works is that if you offer any DIY, for example, obviously you'll have very basic outgoings. If you offer livery packages, especially if you offer livery, full livery, and you've got staff and you've got extensive facilities, you're obviously going to have innumerable costs that go into that. So the best thing I find would be to do is to work out a basic rate for your stable and then work out on top of that for each of your different packages. So what you need to do is you need to work out a suitable pricing structure for all of your packages. So you need to put up basically prices across the board, and your services. So if you're a yard that offers, for example, assisted DIY or part livery, and you can have bolt-on services like holiday cover or full livery for the day, it's really important not just to put up your price livery, your price of your livery packages, but also consider your costs for your services as well. Because if you're going to the effort of repricing your livery packages and sending a letter out to your clients, and some of them perhaps getting in a bit of a huff because your prices are going up, then you might as well just do absolutely everything. Look at your packages, see what you're offering, redo your package prices, redo your service prices, and then send out completely new price lists, amend your contracts as well if needs be, and just do it in one big hit. So as it's a contract, assuming most yards in their contracts have a 30 days notice period, ideally you should match that with a notice of price increases. Some yard owners like to give something a bit longer, so perhaps 2 months, 60 days, 3 months even, I know that some give. But however you should do it, you should give written notice, because effectively it is a contractual change, because obviously they've come to your yard at one price and now you're changing that. Another alternative, or not alternative, but when you send out your price increase letters, you can also give obviously your liveries the option that if that new price or new arrangements aren't suitable to them, that they can also take that notice period as a notice period if they no longer wish to be at the yard. So in 30 days, basically, you send your letters out, and in 30 days, you either have people accepting the new prices or you've got some vacancies cropping up. So also on the Yard Owner Hub, there is a template for notice of price increase letter, and there is also an exceptional price increase. So for example, when all of the electric went absolutely insane, I saw yards saying that they were going up to bills that were like £20,000 plus a year from just a couple of thousand. And that is something that you would seriously have to take immediate action to put your prices up, because that's just, you know, that's a soaring cost. And again, it's part of your business cost. And everybody knew the same things were obviously happening at domestic properties. So things like that, you're well within your right to put an exceptional price increase in. So there's a letter for that as well. You know, if there's a sudden massive change, your rent gets whacked up really high, you can go outside perhaps of any contractual dates and what have you. It's all very much down to what's in your contract wording as well. But again, I'll cover that again shortly. Be prepared to advertise any resulting vacancies at new prices. So for example, within that 30 days notice, you might have 2 people turn around and say, well, actually, I can't afford it. Can I give you notice instead? So you know at the end of that notice period, you're going to have some vacancies arising. And the most important thing is to make sure that you are advertising any resulting vacancies at the new prices. I find sometimes people will put prices up just for new clients coming in, and the old clients stay on the old price, and things like that make it a little bit confusing. So I think price up for one, price up for everybody, and be prepared to have adverts ready, like on LiveryList, for any vacancies that you might have coming up. So it's important to stick to your new pricing structure. Don't make any special exceptions. You might get people coming up to you saying that, you know, they're off sick or whatever, and that they can't quite afford it, and that they'll definitely top you back up if they can just have a little leeway on the price increase. Unfortunately, again, as good as the sentiment is, it can't be like that, because more often than not, the yard owner is the one that will get bitten on the bum by that arrangement when in 3 months' time that person hands their notice and they owe you X amount of money that you're never going to see again. So it's super important that you put your prices up, you notify your clients, and from X day they go up to X amount for absolutely everybody on your yard, new, old, whatever. And again, you don't need to explain or justify your reasons or your costs either in your price increase letter or verbally. One thing that I always say is basically, if anybody questions you, however, if they message you, it's actually, I think it's in the wording of the livery price increase letter. I can't remember it exactly, but it's basically saying that there's been no option but to raise prices to ensure that you can continue offering the level of service that your clients are used to, which is exactly true. You know, if you are ending up subsidising your livery's horses, paying money out of your pocket, that means you're an unviable business, and that's when people start looking at cutting corners. Then that's when horse owners complain that the hay's not as good or the maintenance isn't as good. So it really is important to make that should be the main point. You know, your clients are used to a level of service, are used to a level of maintenance, used to a level of staffing perhaps, and that you need to put prices up to make sure that you can continue that. And as I've already mentioned, put annual price increases in your contract and make sure you use it. Put a specific time each year in your contracts and use it to put your prices up. So missing out on potential income. I know quite a few people that have attended the webinar a bit like this that I've done before. This is a bit of a light bulb moment, and it resonates a lot of things that people realise that they might be actually dipping out of some income on the yard. So forgetting to increase prices for all of your services, as I've just mentioned, you don't want to just put your livery packages up, you want to put your other services up as well. And I'm always asked, oh, how do you work out costs for this, costs for such and such service? And again, it's very simple. Factor in your labour costs. If you're turning a horse out and it takes you, say, 15 minutes to get to the stable, rug it, boot it, walk it to the field, walk back from the field, put its head collar back, you know, say that's 15 minutes and you're charging yourself at £20 an hour, then that's £5 to turn that horse out. And it might seem expensive, but you also have to consider, which I cover in a minute as well, is the service benefit to your livery clients. So it's important that not only do you review your prices and increase them, but you also understand how you're getting to that cost as well, rather than just going, oh, £2, that seems about right. I still see yard owners that are charging 50p for this and 50p for that, and I think nobody really charges 50p for anything these days. So it's really important to charge realistic costs compared to the service that you're offering. Another one is inclusions or extras. So to be very clear with your clients what's included. So again, this can be another clause on your contract, you know, that you're very specific about what is included. Especially if you're offering service livery packages. So if you offer ridden full livery, for example, how many times will that horse be ridden per week? How long will that horse be ridden for per week? The same with, as it says underneath, ad lib hay and bedding. Is that actual ad lib, as in they can just go and literally help themselves to as much as they want, to the point that you or your staff are then putting it back on the muck heap in some vicious cycle? Or do you actually have a fair usage policy? Because if you have a fair usage policy, some yards charge out it's X kilograms per day, or it's based on a ratio of the horse's weight and workload, then that again needs to be in your contract. If it's bedding, how many bales of bedding are you allowing each week? It's all these small details that stop clients coming back to you and saying, well, why have you charged me extra? Or it allows you to charge extra because it's there in black and white and there's no argument about exactly what's included. Ad hoc services are another one, favours that aren't charged. So I keep referring back to things that I see on the yard owner group. Obviously, it's very relevant because it's current and it's problems that a majority of you are facing. So, for example, Sparkle's been a bit lame and he needs his leg hosed, and his owner's asked you to hose his leg down for 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. Do you charge for it? And my answer is always, well, that's great. You can do that out of the goodness of your own heart for 20 minutes a day. But that's 20 minutes of your time. But not only that, but what if you then had 2, 3, 4, 5 horses on your yard that all needed their legs hosed for 10 minutes in the morning and the evening? Would it then be as feasible? Sometimes it's easier just to say, do you know what? That's the limit of what we do. If you want such and such done, if you need 23 different boots on your horse and its tail plaited and bandaged up before it goes in the field, or it needs cold hosing, or it needs bandaging, or anything. If that is something that is outside the remit of what you would usually offer, then yes, you should be charging for it. And if you don't know what to charge, just simply charge an hourly rate. So put a clause, again, going back to contracts, anything outside the remit of your inclusions of your livery packages are charged per 15 minutes, for example, at an hourly rate of, for example, £20 an hour. And then there's no argument. It's very clear. Again, the point is, a lot of yard owners miss out on income because of a lack of communication. So it's really important to have that reference point to go back to your clients and say, yes, this is why you've been charged an extra £10 this month, because I had to, do this, that, or the other. So underpricing additional services, I've already touched on. This is making sure that you're properly charging out your time or the time of your for your staff if you are carrying out additional services. Try not to just do things as favors. You know, there's so many times that horse says, oh, could you just quickly do this? Could you quickly do that? Could you quickly show me this? And that's great. There is a limit, because obviously as a yard owner, they are coming to you to, you know, you need to take it as a positive that they're coming to you for your advice and for your assistance, but also you need to understand when it's a limit of it being something that should be being charged for. And it can be quite a tricky line, but again, this is where really good, clear communication can be the key. A policy on service stealing. So again, always lots of posts about we have an instructor that comes in, but I offer lessons. Would you charge this instructor to hire the school? Effectively, if you're having an outside instructor coming in, using your arena to teach your liveries, okay, obviously instruction is a specific thing. They might want a specific instructor that's not you. But there is still a value to that person coming onto your premises and using your facilities, and also from an administration point of view as well. So you need to be checking with that instructor that they are properly insured to be offering those services. So they should have professional liability insurances. You might want to check what their actual qualifications are, or for example, if they're on the register of instructors. So it's all an administration job for you as well. So there is an indirect cost to you allowing other people coming in. The same as freelance grooms, if you have people coming on to clip. And there are some services like clipping, for example, or holiday cover, that if that's something you offer, you're well within your right to say, actually, no, I don't want anybody else to come onto the yard, because we offer that service. So if you've got somebody coming in to clip 2 horses, it's £50, that £50 could have been yours. So although it might seem quite strict, again, it's going back to the fact that it's a business, and if you can offer that service and you can charge a fee for that service, then why would you not? And again, it's going back to putting in your contracts that that's a rule. You know, if you don't allow freelance grooms, if you don't allow outside instructors, anything like that, it needs to be in your contracts, and then everybody's clear. And another part on missing out on income is loaners and sharers. Again, I think this is down to sort of administrative, health and safety, having extra bodies on the yard, but it's definitely commonplace now for yard owners to be charging, even if it's just a nominal fee, for loaners and sharers, because especially at the moment, with affordability of horses being quite tricky at the moment, rather than part with their horses, a lot of owners have decided that they will perhaps downgrade their livery packages and in turn get somebody to come in and part loan or share the horse a couple of days a week. So some yard owners are thinking, well, hold on, if we're missing out on the services because they've got the other people looking after the horse on X number of days, then should there be some sort of charge to cover that? So again, that's very particular. That I think it really depends on the clientele and how the yard works, and your perspective of it as a yard owner with people coming and going. But that's certainly another area that yard owners are starting to charge a fee for. Ways to cut your yard costs. So main outgoings are definitely consumables, hay bedding, insurance, electricity, and staffing. So whatever it is that you are using, you should shop around for the highest value or the bulk bought items. You should, for example, review all of your prices, see what you charged last year, and go and find some quotes for things like your various insurances or your electric, see if you can get a better deal on that. And bulk bought items as well. So for example, if you order things in a higher quantity, and even if it's something that's not directly a cost, it could be a saving. For example, will the feed place deliver your feed if you order X amount, or your bedding if you order X amount? Will they offer you a small discount? Things like taking out like a business, not business account, like you know, a professional account. Sometimes you get discount on those if you can prove that you're a business. It's all about shopping around, basically, to try to not just accept the new prices that are coming in for renewals or the next time you want such and such item. It is to perhaps spend an afternoon going through reviewing everything and then seeing where you can make savings. Reviewing your ad lib policies. So I've already covered that. Think about putting in fair use policies for things like hay, bedding. Consider ways to reduce your energy consumption, electric and water. I'm fairly sure that SEIB have got something coming up on this about improving sustainability of yards. There's been quite a chat about it on the Yard Owners group over the last couple of weeks, stemming from the SEIB doing a feature on it. So I know that there's some good ideas coming up in that about ways that yards can reduce their energy consumption and their waste as well, and to just be a more environmentally sustainable business. Review the efficiency of your services, so perhaps see if there's any labour time that can be cut, and then that applies to the bottom one, your working methods and employment. So is there any way, I mean, it's not ideal obviously for your staff, but labour is a huge cost, so if there's any way that you can reduce working hours or even improve the way that things are done, the processes, where people have to go to do things, what can be done in advance to save time, that sort of thing. That can obviously help save time, either for yourself or for your staff, and then obviously in turn wages. Counterproductive cost cutting, not insuring your business correctly. So basically these are all things that ultimately could lead to problems. So not insuring your business correctly, employing illegally or using casual labour, purchasing low quality hay feed or bedding, poor working standards or methods, reducing maintenance of facilities, reducing staffing or training, and tunnel vision. That means, I read this the other day, and it basically means that it's kind of your way or the highway. It might be that one of your livery clients or a member of staff suggests something to you that perhaps might save time, or they might suggest an alternative supplier or something, and you just think no, the way that I do it, that's how we do it, and I'm stuck in that. But sometimes that's not always the best way. It's quite good to be open-minded as a business owner, and try to realize things like, if you're reducing your maintenance or your poor working, lower working standards, perhaps there becomes less focus alternately by on the welfare of the horses. These are all things that then reputationally aren't going to do you any favors. So you're kind of doing yourself a disservice by counterproductive cost cutting. So it's okay, we're nearly at the end now. So ways you can generate additional income is review your pricing structure. So as we've already mentioned, increase prices for your packages and your services. Introduce late fees, because we all know that is a complete pain when somebody decides to message at 5 in the morning or 10 at night and say, oh, can you just stick Bobby out in the morning, and it's an utter inconvenience. So you can have a late fee if you're asked less than 24 or 12 hours, and again in your contract, and everybody knows that that's a thing. Introduce your limits for ad lib, as I've already mentioned, and charge for the surplus. So if they exceed that fair usage policy, charge additionally per net, per kilo, per bale. Charging for lorry and trailer parking. So many people still do this for free. It's I used to love being able to keep my horse box at the yard. It was so easy. There was no faff. You got the lorry, got your horse on, and off you went. There's a definitive benefit to your clients, and that's what you have to remember, is the benefit to the client, as in it's not just the fact that you're turning their horse out, it's the fact they perhaps don't have to get up so early, they don't have to put their yard clothes on, they don't have to drive and use the fuel and the time to drive, they don't have to get grubby at the yard. It's all these things. It's not just the cost of your time, it's all the other things that can upscale that price of the service you're providing. So yes, it might only cost you £2 in labour to walk across a short concrete strip and turn the horse out, but £5 to that horse owner to not have to get up and do all these things is fairly cheap, I think. So it's definitely a point to include the benefit to livery clients. Charge for additional or unexpected services, going back to things like needing to hose legs off or administer medicines, anything like that. And like I put at the bottom, as I keep mentioning, because it's so important, if you include these policies on your contracts, then there's no confusion what people are being charged for. Increasing your value as a business. So like all industries, whether it's a plumber or a landscape gardener, whether you're having a new kitchen put in, all industries have a high and low value. So it might be that you are more expensive than your nearest yard that offers similar things, but you simply can't compare 2 yards, even if they're on the same road with the same packages and what look like the same facilities. Their costs will not be the same. So you have to work out what your costs are and suck it up basically and make the best out of charging what you need to charge to make sure your business is successful. So one of the key points of that is finding the owners willing to pay what you need to charge. You can find a unique selling point to stand out. So perhaps you could offer a livery package that others don't offer. There's quite a lot of niche, rehabilitation yards, a lot of track livery, a lot of natural and organic livery cropping up. It's finding something perhaps other yards nearby don't offer, so that you can't be comparable with the yards that might charge less money. And also selling your positive points. So if you're fully insured, if you are, for example, on the if you're a Red Wings Strangles pledging yard, if you're a KBHH excellence yard, if you're BHS approved, ABRS approved, you need to be shouting about that on your marketing, on your website, on your LiveryList listings, on your social media pages. You know, if you have good employments, codes of conduct, or health and safety policies, you know, if you've got qualifications, anything basically that gives your business kudos compared to Farmer Giles down the road that just rents out some tatty old stables and has zero else to do with it. You really need to be shouting about these because it will add value to your business. You need to remain professional to remember that it is a business. Consider the way that you promote your yard. So again, always sell your positive points, really good photos, really good clear descriptions of everything that you do, and get all your paperwork and processes in order. So if you're putting your prices up and that, or this webinar triggers you to think, yeah, actually, let's have a look at our various policies or put a price increase, do everything together, work out your prices, make your changes to your contracts. Just send out one little pack to your liveries that says, right, we're changing things and this is what it's going to be from 1st of November, 1st December, whatever. Get it all in order one time and then that's it. It's done, and it's the same for everybody else going forward. And seeking professional help can, some people think that it costs money to have professional help, but really it can be an advantage. So for example, if you employ people, the Equestrian Employers Association offers so much guidance, tailored assistance for employers, and I think it's less than £50 a month to join. I would always recommend joining that because they offer so much help and guidance to make sure you're doing everything by the book and that you're all up to date on the ever-changing employment legislation. Accountants and bookkeepers, having a great accountant can be brilliant because they can go through, and the same with the bookkeeper, they can tell you where your highest outgoings are. You know, they can help keep a tab on your costs if you don't have the time to do it or the want to do it. A really good accountant can be great as well, especially if you're VAT registered or you're a limited company. They can really help you work out the most economical ways to do your tax returns. And professional marketing and social media management, again, this goes back to marketing. Perhaps you don't have time or you're not great on social media or websites. It really can pay to invest or get someone to do that for you. Legal support, things like checking that your contracts are all compliant. And insurance brokers, obviously, like SEIB are an insurance broker, someone that specifically works within our industry, the livery industry, that understands, that can give you a tailored insurance rather than going to just a singular insurance provider or a generic insurance provider. You know, going to a broker like SEIB can often get you a good deal. Keep it professional. This is so important. You must forget it as a business. You need to make sure that you're clear on your charges, especially extras like I've been discussing. Make sure that you're issuing clear and regular invoices, and be clear on your expectations of bill payments. So don't let people get behind. Have a really strict policy. You know, you're well within your right to put in late payment fees. If they don't pay the amount on time, you put it onto the subsequent month's invoice. Again, that's things to have really clear in your contracts. And when you put an invoice out and you have a payment date, you want that payment. It's all about cash flow as well. If you're not having the money in the bank that you're owed, perhaps you're then having to put on a credit card or something, a bill that otherwise you could have paid for, then you're paying interest, and again, it gets in a bit of a catch-22 situation. So you need to be really, send out proper invoices, not just a WhatsApp of what's owed and, put the money in the post box, proper invoices that say everything that they're paying for and a clear definitive payment date. Keep open your lines of communication. So this goes back to being transparent about the extra charges, being very clear about what people are being charged for, and just the way that you communicate with the yard, and keep clear business owner and client boundaries. So you might have livery clients that are friends or family or that have been there for years, but it's really important to remember that whoever that livery client is, even if it's a complete stranger that's moved from Timbuktu to keep their horse with you, that you've never set eyes on before, they should be treated exactly the same as a friend or family member when it comes to livery charges, services. It can be very easy to blur the lines between liveries and friendship when your liveries become your friends. So that's when issues tend to arise. So it's super important, because that ultimately can lead to, leeway on payment, leeway on being charged for things. So what next? So calculate your costs. If you've not thought that that was a good idea by this point of this evening, I would hope you do. So calculate your costs for livery and all services. Consider if a price increase is needed, which I'm sure, hopefully, many of you will take on board that there might be price increases needed. Be proactive to make changes. So get on to raising your prices, introduce price increases and getting planned ones into your contracts, amend your packages, look at ways that you can save. So going back to shopping around, add value and better promote yourself, and review the efficiency of your yard. So going back to the way things are done on the yard, review how you market your yard and services, and maintain good business records. So again, for a lot of these things, there are items on the Yard Owner Hub that that can help you facilitate all of these things. And again, a link will be sent out to this to you. So that is the end. So I'm going to answer a selection of questions. I can't actually see the chat while I'm sharing my screen, so I will unshare my screen and have a look in a second. But basically, the web address there is for the Yard Owner Hub. If you want to join the Facebook group, it's called that. It's quite lengthy. Livery Yard Owners UK Discussions and Advice. I think if you actually just Google Livery Yard Owner Group, it is the top result on Google now because it's so popular. Obviously there's some information there about SEIB, but I think Katie's just going to pop on quickly in a second once I have done the question and answer session. So I am now going to stop sharing my screen and see. I mean, there might not even be any questions. Well, there aren't really any questions. Oh, well, that's good. That's super. Hopefully that means I've done my job really well. So like I say, this has been recorded, so I have gone through it at sort of lightning speed. So the link will be sent out to the recording. So if anybody wants, you know, when you're watching it, you can go through and pause and perhaps look at things in a bit more detail than I've gone through them. And yeah, well, if there's no questions, which is great, I'll hand things back over to Katie.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. Oh, I think there might be a question that's just come in. We've had two. I will let you answer them.
Thanks. Alan, VAT is a really complicated area. The best person to speak to really about VAT is an accountant, because even accountants will disagree with each other about VAT, because there's certain aspects of livery that can be charged VAT and certain aspects that can't, and it's all down to the way that you word your contracts and that you issue your invoices. I am going to put some more resources on about VAT and accounting over the winter, but it's something that I need to do quite a lot of research into and to make sure that I get the right information. I do know though that the ABRS recently held a webinar about VAT, and I believe it's recorded. So what I will do, because you've just reminded me, is if you're not in the Facebook group, request to join the Facebook group, assume you're on Facebook, and I'll put a link to the one that the ABRS did, because I know that they had an accountant did that, so that will hopefully be helpful. And Beth, what extras would you put on a full Livery Yard package? It would depend really. You'd probably be thinking outside of services. So you might be thinking of, with that, for example, if someone has a sharer, if you are giving horse box and trailer parking, just look at the different things that perhaps not everybody needs, but some might need, and therefore it might warrant a separate fee. But again, it depends. Full livery on one yard is completely different to full livery on another yard. What would I expect yard manager wages to be? That's a completely it's a completely personal decision. Like I said, I always say I think £20 an hour is a good amount, mainly because that's really easy to split into 15-minute portions, £5 for every 15 minutes. But again, it's down to personal. You know, some people might think that's too much to charge. Some people might think that's enough. So I think that really is the amount that you as an individual would want to receive for your time. It's basically what you value your own time on. Yes, Rachel, thank you. I did, when I just said that, I knew that I couldn't think when they did the VAT. And you're right, it was at lunchtime today. So I'll speak to, because I also work with the ABRS, so I'll speak to them and I'll get that, and I will put that both on the group and I'll put it on the news of the hub. Thank you, Rachel, that's well reminded. Right, back to you, Katie. That was all of them.
No worries. Thank you everyone for your questions. So thank you, Cheryl, for running through the presentation this evening. I imagine there is a lot of food for thought for everyone. As Cheryl mentioned earlier, over the next few days, we'll be sending out some follow-up content. There'll be links to lots of useful content that Cheryl's touched upon in the presentation. If you haven't had a chance to pop your question in, or you think of a question that you wish you'd asked, please do email it through to us afterwards. You should have our email address in the emails that you've received so far with the link. It's marketing@seib.co.uk, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible once we've liaised with Cheryl. One last thing from me. Cheryl's already touched upon it. SEIB do livery yard insurance. So when your renewal is up for, when your renewal is due, please do give our team a try. They're a team of horse owners and they'll be more than happy to do a review of your insurances to make sure you've got the protection you need. But yeah, that is it from me. My watch thinks I'm talking to it. But yeah, thank you, Cheryl, and thank you everybody for spending a bit of your Monday evening with us. I hope you found it useful.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Katie, for hosting, and to SEIB for helping me facilitate it much smoother than when I do it myself.
No worries, it's a pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.